clear. Chapter 12, Lesson 4. So far, we've looked at the first 17 verses. Section 1, keep your eyes on Jesus, verses 1 and 2. Section 2, I think the author's point is don't give up, which, as we know, many of the Hebrews Christians were doing. They were being persecuted in a variety of different ways, and some of them were turning back to Judaism. And the purpose of this whole book, actually, is to keep them from apostatizing. If they abandon Christ, they have nothing left. There's nowhere else to go. And that's the point of this whole book. The latter text, we've analyzed it in two different classes so far. The point is the Lord disciplines His children for their profit. Sometimes, a lot of times actually, I watched a TV show last night where a girl prayed for her mama not to die, but her mama did die. And she was mad at the Lord because her mama died. Even though she asked Him not to let her die, she did die. And the young lady was angry with God over it. But it all worked out well in the end, as they usually do. The point the author makes is the Lord does chastise us. We don't know when He's chastising us. We can't know things like that. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and sometimes the Lord chastises us. How do we tell the difference? We don't know. We might figure it out on down the road sometime, but while we're going through misery, we don't know what's going on. All we can do is be faithful and wait for the storm to pass, because it will pass. One thing's for sure, it will get better. There's no doubt about that. It will get better. You gotta die, and it's going to be better then. Okay, it's got to get better. It can't go on forever. At least you can wait on death to come, and that'll be real good. That'll be when your pleasure really starts. A kingdom that cannot be shaken is the next section we're going to look at, verses 18 through 29. We need to go first and read. I think I've got that divided, don't I? Man, I guess I don't. Read those verses. The point is, you are a new kingdom. For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them any more. For they could not endure what was commanded. That, of course, is Sinai in the background. Israel camped out below. And if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was this sight that Moses said, I am exceedingly afraid and trembling. That was then, but this is now. It's a whole different thing. You have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, to the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly, church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. See that you do not refuse him who speaks. Maybe we were supposed to analyze that as we went through. The point that the author makes in that passage is back when Israel met with the Lord at Mount Sinai, it was a fearful experience. Even Moses was shaken by it. Our approach to God was much different. We've come into the presence not of a trembling mountain, but of the city of angels itself, into the presence of God. Because what we have is so much better than what they were offered, see that you do not refuse him who speaks. That would be, of course, the Lord. For if they did not escape who refused him who spoke on earth, that, of course, would be Moses, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven. And that, of course, is Jesus. You go back to the Old Testament, and we see the wrath of God uh, uh, poured out on individuals, nations, communities, whatever. When the Lord made a promise that if they were to fail to be faithful, that he would punish them, he carried out his promise. Okay, we go through and we see it all the time. Leviticus chapter 10, the sons of Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, they offered up a strange fire and they died on the spot. Okay, if they felt the wrath of God for disobedience, how much more do you think we shall feel the wrath of God, since we have come unto something so much better than they did? Okay? If they refused what Moses told them and it caused them trouble, how much more trouble are we going to be in if we refuse Jesus, who is a superior messenger than Moses was? There's so much teaching today about the love of God. It's perverted teaching, actually. There's so much teaching about the love of God, even to the point that even some of our brethren, are saying that there is no hell, that God doesn't do such things. I've heard preachers in lectureships who have denied, for example, the account I just mentioned with Nadab and Abihu. I heard a preacher one time say he wished that had never been put in the Bible because it's led people to the wrong conclusion. Well, what conclusion did it lead us to? Well, Nadab and Abihu disobeyed God, and they were punished for their disobedience. Well, isn't that the point the Lord wanted us to get? I mean, it didn't lead us to the wrong conclusion. It led us to the very conclusion the Lord wants us to know and understand. That's how he feels about disobedience. Better had it never been put in the Bible? I don't think that's the case. It's put there as a warning. Don't make those kinds of mistakes, because the consequences are much too grave. This notion of trying to present God in a way that he isn't is actually foolishness. To say that God doesn't punish disobedience because it makes people feel better about God, that's foolishness. You know, if people don't like God for who he is, that's what life's all about. That's what we're here to find out. Some people look at God and they think, I don't like him. Some people look at God and they think, I love him. You know, that's the purpose of life. Those who don't like God can make that decision. Those who do like God can make their decision. We live, we make our decision, we die, and then we're judged. That's what the whole thing's about. To lie to people and tell them that God does not judge disobedience is wrong, because people are disobeying God and they think they're going to get away with it. But they're not. In the day of judgment, the truth's going to come out. This is what our author is telling us. See that you do not refuse Jesus, because the punishment today would be so much worse than it was then. Whose voice then shook the earth trembled when God spoke at Sinai, but now he has promised, saying, yet once more I shake not only the earth, but I shake heaven itself. The voice that's come to man today is so much greater because of the offering that's been at stake. It's so much greater that not just the earth is shaken, but heaven and earth as well. There's more intensity, more power. You're going from the lesser to the greater. That's the point of it. Now this yet once more, he said yet once more, that indicates that there's a removal of those things that are being shaken as of the things that are made. Okay, that would be the old kingdom. In the fact that he said, yet once more, he shook the earth in the establishment of the old kingdom. The fact that he's shaken it once again indicate that the old kingdom is going to pass away, that the things which cannot be shaken may remain, and that, of course, would be the new kingdom. Out with the old kingdom, in with the new kingdom. It was prophesied by the prophets, yet many people of the Jewish persuasion failed to make that connection. through the various prophecies. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom, notice that word receiving. We haven't received. It's not ours. We are in the process of receiving a kingdom, okay? It won't reach completion until after death, okay, on the other side of this world. And the reason for that is there is the possibility of our falling away. We are in the process of receiving a kingdom. This kingdom that we're in the process of receiving cannot be shaken. It cannot be changed. It cannot be modified. It cannot be destroyed. Since we have come into such a kingdom and are in the process of making that kingdom our own, let us have grace by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, knowing what's coming, what's going to be ours, what we are the recipient or what we are going to receive. Let us determine to serve God with all our might. I want to look at the way the English Standard Version states verse 28 here. First of all, the first part, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, here's how it's recorded in the English Standard Version. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. To me, it's a little easier for us to understand the meaning in the text than it is in the first part. It's a little more challenging to understand, at least it is for me. But the meaning would be, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And then the latter part would be, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe. I'm thinking of awesomeness. The point is, we're in the process of receiving the kingdom of God. Let us be mindful of what is ours if we maintain fidelity to God, and therefore maintain fidelity to God. I think that's, no? For our God is a consuming fire. And that's the part, of course, that some people want to escape today, is the fact that God is a consuming fire. Paul said, behold, the goodness and the severity of God. It's foolishness to just give consideration to the love of God without giving consideration to the severity of God. Life is an opportunity for us to look at God, to see God, and to decide how we feel about Him. That's what the whole thing's for. And it's our responsibility, I believe, to present as accurate a picture of God as humanly possible, so that people can see this person and decide how they feel about Him. I'm not exactly sure what the other party's point is. Any questions over this? It's relatively simple in what he's talking about. That brings us into chapter 13, the final chapter of this book. This would be lesson 1. Reviewing chapter 12 rather quickly. Keep your eyes on Jesus, verses 1 and 2. Do not grow weary. Do not give up, verses 3 through 17. Remember that we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, changed, modified, destroyed. That's what we're to keep in mind. The saints haven't laid hold on the kingdom yet. That comes later. For now, we must be faithful until death. Once we receive the kingdom in actuality, it will never be removed from that kingdom. It's ours for eternity. Secondly, though the kingdom cannot be moved, the Christian can, and therefore must be careful. That's the point of those verses. Now he continues to exhort the saints in chapter 13. Sacrifices that please God. This is, I think, the text, the content of verses 1 through 19. Good, we got sections. We'll take a look first. We'll read verses 1 through 9 and then come back and analyze them. I haven't seen this since maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I can't remember what's coming up, but I didn't get a chance to go over it today. I woke up a little late. But let's read it together. Let brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing some have unwittingly entertained angels. Remember the prisoners, as if chained with them, those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are in the body also. Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge. Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Remember those who rule over you, who have spoken the word of God to you, whose faith follow, considering the outcome of their conduct. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Do not be carried about with various and strange doctrines, for it is good that the heart be established by grace, not with foods which have not profited those who have been occupied with them. Now we'll go back and analyze it. See, I don't even remember if I have comments on this or not. We'll take a look. I think I finished it. Yeah, okay, good. Let brotherly love continue. One of the main subjects of Scripture, of course, is love. Whether our love for God or our love for one another, it's one of the greatest topics that we read about in the Bible. Obviously, because it does take up so much room in the Bible, love is very important. It's good to go to church, and it's good to do all the stuff we do as Christians. But if we don't do it motivated by love, there's no value to it. Okay, love is it. That's it. That's the everything. We have got to learn to love. Okay, and I say learn because it's something we have to learn. It doesn't come naturally. There is a type of love that does come naturally. It's a love of a natural sort of love. It's a love for the mama and for the daddy. It's a love for being a part of a family. There's a love that exists between members of the same family, provided the family is what it ought to be. It's an intense love. It's a love that's not shared with the rest of the world. It's a love that may never be shared with God, but it's a love that people have. It's a kind of love. Okay, you don't have to plan on it. You don't have to train yourself for it. But the love that's spoken of in the Scripture most often is the kind of love we must learn to have, to love other people. And it comes in a variety of forms, but boiled down, it has to do with our will. I choose to love, okay? That's where it begins. I choose to love. I choose to love God. I've made a decision that I'm going to walk with God, okay? That's the love the Lord is looking for. That's the love He commands. That's the only love He commands. Now, given enough time, a person may love God like their daddy even more than their own daddy, okay? That happens. Some people get so close to God, they have that familial type love for God. But that's not the love that's commanded. The love that's commanded is the will. That the will, a person has made a decision that they're going to walk with God. They're going to do what God would have them to do. When you think about a lot of people who talk about their love for God, they don't really have love for God. For example, Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments, John 14:15. You know, it follows. If you love me, if you've made a decision that you're going to walk with me through this world, if you love me, you're going to keep my commandments. That's a given. One follows the other. Well, what happens if a person doesn't really keep the commandments of God? They don't want to. Well, it's evidence of the absence of love. Okay? That's the proof. We can see it for ourselves. You can't necessarily tell me I don't love God, but I can. There are things the Lord wants me to do, and I don't want to do that. I don't care to do this, or I don't care to do that, but I don't want to do this. Okay, that's demonstrating to me the absence of love for God in my life. And the Bible is a mirror for the soul. It instructs me to love God. I realize I don't love God, so through the mirror I can see I need to spruce up a little more and learn to love God. It's something that we will to do, we choose to do, and if we haven't chosen to do that, for example, I think some people, they choose to become members of the church, but that's about as far as it goes. I choose to be a member of the church. So they go and they're baptized and they go to church. They do stuff that churches do. But as far as developing a love for God, that doesn't happen. Okay? And that's a problem. Because the Bible deals so much with our love for God. There is so much teaching on our love for God that if we don't learn to love God, we've got a problem. It's a serious problem. Because even though we may do the things people who love God do, we won't ever do all the things that such people do. For example, one of the things that most motivates a person to do everything the Lord wants him to do is love. If you don't love God, there are times in your life, let's say fear is involved, and fear is going to beat you down. You can't go through with it because of fear. It might be fear of rejection, for example. Friends at work, family members, whatever. If they know what I believe, they're going to think I'm a cornball. So I'm going to make sure that they don't know. Fear can destroy our love for God. Love, if love is there, it doesn't matter. Your love for your family, for example, when you're tending to your family, you're taking care of your family. You don't really care if other people ridicule you. I remember when I was raising children, and they started back then to punish people for spanking their children. Oh, that didn't affect me at all. I loved my child, and I did what I thought I had to do in order to raise my child rightly. If they needed a spanking, they got a spanking. I didn't care what they say up at Kroger's or what they say in the law. I'm going to do what I need to do in order to take care of my children. That's what love does. Love doesn't really care. Love does what it has to do, and that's what love for God does. Without love, we're not going to have enough reason to do everything the Lord would have us to do. It's kind of like faith. Without faith, we haven't got enough reason. There's got to be a reason why people do the things they do. People ask me sometimes, well, why do you go to India? Well, there's two reasons. One is faith, one is love. Okay? That's the only two reasons I know of. There's not another good reason to go. And that's what moves me to go. That's why I go over to India. It's because I believe it's what my Father would have me to do, and therefore I go. My wife doesn't like it, but she tolerates it because she knows I have to do it. Because I believe it's what my Lord wants me to do, therefore I have to go. Love and faith motivates us to do whatever it is we believe the Lord wants us to do. Without love or faith, you don't have enough reason to do it. Okay? Fear of hell is not a good reason because that's too far off. That's another day. That's not today. It's only when it's not when we fear God that we draw close to God. It's when we love Him or when we trust Him. That's when we draw close to God. I would have to admit that the reason I probably became a Christian in the first place is because I didn't want to go to hell. I wasn't so much concerned about going to heaven, but I was pretty much concerned about going to hell. I did not want to go to hell. I heard people talk about hell, and I thought, that's not for me. I don't want to go to hell, so I think I'll become a Christian. And I did. Well, since then, things have changed. I've come to know God much better than I used to did. And now my fear of hell isn't so great. Now my love for God is what's so great. My children, as they grew older, they weren't afraid of me. They're not afraid of me today. They're not motivated by fear. Now, if I got angry, they would be upset with that. That would bother them. That would trouble them. But they haven't given me a reason to be upset, a reason to get angry, and therefore there's no fear on their part. They're not motivated by fear. They're motivated now by love. A transition takes place in our families. A transition takes place in our spiritual family. Our relationship toward God changes with time. And it's so important. We talk about love like it's a pill. It's not a pill. It's a reality. It's something that we must do. And unless I purpose to do it, it ain't going to happen. The only person that can teach me to love is me. And if I don't do it for myself, it ain't going to get done. I can teach you a lot of stuff. I can teach you that Adam was the first man. But teach you to love God? I can't do it. I don't have that kind of power. God doesn't have that kind of power. That's something we have to do for ourselves. The only person that wields that kind of power over any one of us is ourselves. So unless I've made up my mind that I'm going to love my God, it's not going to happen. My point to you is this. The Bible deals with this matter of love so much that you need to invest time in learning to love God. And you do that by setting your mind, fixing your mind, that you're going to do what the Lord would have you to do. And you're going to run across something that you really not want to do. You don't want to do it because you don't know how. Okay, learn how. You don't want to do it because you're afraid. Do it anyway. Conquer your fear. I remember the first time I ever spoke in public. Kenneth Anderson was preaching at Free Will. And I was going to preach in the night service. Okay, I'll preach at night. And I worked me out a sermon. It took me about a month or two. And I got one worked out on a piece of paper. And Sunday night come, and it was my turn to preach. And Kenneth was sitting next to me, and I said, I can't do it. I said, I can't do it. I said, if I have to get up there, I'm going to get sick. I can't do this. He said, what are we going to do? I said, either you're going to do it or we might as well all go to the house. I can't do this. I did that to that man 7 or 8 times, I think. And finally, I was so disgusted with myself that I finally got up there and said something. I have no idea what it was, but I did say something. Fear beat me down 7 or 8 times, or whatever it was. Fear got the best of me until I got tired of fear getting the best of me, and then I fought back. And things changed after that. You got to beat fear back before the change can come. So fear stops us. We got to kick it and keep going. It's not easy. Nobody said it's easy. It's not easy, but it's possible. It's doable, and we can all do it. Let brotherly love continue. This is love between brethren, okay? Equally important to love for God is our love for one another, our interest in the well-being of one another. We must possess that. It must continue. They obviously already demonstrated brotherly love, but they must continue to do that. Don't forsake your brethren and go back to Judaism. You keep on with brotherly love. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some have unwittingly or without knowledge entertained angels. In Matthew 25, Jesus is looking at the day of the judgment, and he said, some are going to be on his right hand. The king will say to those on his right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. These are the ones that were given a home in heaven. And this is why they were given a home. I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Back at that time, Christians were on the move. They were being persecuted for their faith. And they're scattered all abroad, we're told in the book of Acts. And this went on for a long time. There were different times when Christians were persecuted in this area or that area. For example, in the 60s, around about what 62, 63 A.D., uh, um, the nutty one, what's his name? I forgot his name. Nero. Caesar blamed the Christians for the burning of Rome, and the Christians living in the Roman city was persecuted, and they had to flee. There were times when people, Christian people, had to flee, and this, I believe, is probably what the apostle was talking about. They were strangers. They would go from town to town, from house to house, looking for help. They've left their homes, they've left their jobs, they've left their families, they've been scattered, and they come to a house and they need some help. Okay? Well, these are the people he has on mind. Do not forget to entertain these folks. For all you know, you may be entertaining an angel. That happened to Abraham, you recall. He entertained two strangers, and those two strangers turned out to be angels. So do good to strangers. Now today, you got to use, intelligence. You got to be discreet. There are a lot of people who are crooks. A lot of people are cons. Every week, usually a few times a week, somebody comes to my house, and I can't understand some of them. They I know when they get the money, they go out and they buy dope. I know that. And I've even told them, if I give you money, you're going to go buy dope. And no, I won't. Well, you have before. Well, no, it's going to be different this time. I'm not going to buy dope. Time and time and time again, and they still come back. I know they're going to buy dope. I've told them I know they're going to buy dope, and they still come back looking for money. It's very hard today to entertain strangers because we're living at a different time. Things are so much different. But if there is someone, who, even though a stranger, who is in need of our assistance that we don't know is a crook, we may find it practical, we may find it our responsibility to entertain these people. By entertain, I mean help them out, help them with what they need. Back at that time, they usually took them into their homes. Today, it's usually people needing a little money, or maybe a little food, or something like that. Be careful to entertain these people, because for all you know, it may be an angel knocking at your door. I've seen a movie about that one time, but it was a real angel that came to the door, and it was a good movie. It's just not the kind of thing that actually happens. But it made a good point. Anyway, verse 3, remember the prisoners. These people are in prison. It's not like today. People are in prison because they committed murder and all that stuff. These people are in prison because they're Christian. Okay, they were arrested because they were Christian. Some of them was tried and incarcerated. Okay, these are the people he's talking about. Remember the prisoners. In Hebrews 12:4, the author said, "In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood." Christians weren't being put to death at this point, but they were being persecuted in a variety of other ways, and one of those ways was being incarcerated. Well, remember those brethren who were in prison. Someone says, Joe, he went down to Sardis and he preached the gospel, and they threw him in prison. And some brethren would say, well, he shouldn't have went down there in the first place. It's his own fault. If he hadn't gone down to Sardis, he wouldn't be in prison right now. He's got nobody to blame but himself. Well, Joe may have been doing the will of God, so let's let it go with that. Joe went down to Sardis. He was put in prison. We ought to remember Joe because he was incarcerated for his faith. He did what he believed the Lord wanted him to do. Remember the prisoners. Don't just shrug them off as if they're getting what they deserve. Because if they deserve it, we deserve it too, since we're the same as they are. Jesus, Stephen, James, of course, were all put to death. That was the exception rather than the rule. But at this time it was about prisoners, as if chained with them, as if you were chained with them, because that could be the case. Instead of caught you, instead of Joe, it would be you incarcerated. Remember those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are in the body also. If the foot gets smashed, the whole body cries. Okay, it has an effect on the entire body. Whenever one member of the body gets damaged, it affects the whole body ultimately, some way, somehow. When a person who's a member of the church gets incarcerated, it has an effect on the whole body as a whole. We're all affected by their suffering and by their struggle. At least we ought to be. Those who are mistreated, remember them, since you yourself are a part of the body that they're a part of. The foot was incarcerated in prison. Well, that affects me because I'm a fingernail. It still affects me. In Matthew 25, verse 36, again speaking about the people in the day of the judgment, the Lord said, I was in prison and you came to me. Now, wait a second. Am I saying it's wrong to talk to people who's in prison about obeying the gospel or something like that? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about what the context is dealing with. The context is dealing with the saints, okay, those who have been incarcerated because of their faith. That is not to say that we can't reach out a helping hand to the rest of the population in prison, even those who have committed heinous crimes. I spoke to a brother one time. He baptized Jeffrey Dahmer, and he told me it's one of the hardest things he ever done in his life. It was a real struggle. I don't know, you young ones may not know Dahmer. He killed and ate the people he killed. He's a cannibal. And was there 8 or 9 people, was there? Yeah, I can't remember the exact number. But there's several people. He ate them and he killed them and ate them. He kept them in his freezer and get them out like you would beef or something. And anyway, they called him at the prison and they said, Dahmer is wanting to talk to a preacher. And he said, first thing that come across his mind, he said, why did they have to call me? Well, he went to prison. He taught Dahmer. They had a study for so long, and then he decided he wanted to obey the gospel. And he took him and immersed him in water. Of course, salvation is between him and God. Did he ever change your heart? I don't know. Maybe, I hope. But that's something only he and God knows. But we should be kind to anybody who asks for our kindness. It could be very hard to do sometimes. But once again, good things are sometimes hard. It's hard to do. But we do it anyway because that's what the Lord wants us to do. 1 Corinthians 12:26, what I mentioned a moment ago, if one member suffers, all the members suffer. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Whenever any one of us is either hurt or honored, it has an effect on the church at Center Grove in totality, since we are a single unit, one body. Marriage. Marriage is honorable among all. The ESV says, let marriage be held in honor among all. There's a lot of argument that goes on about that phrase. Is the author saying is marriage is honorable among all things, or is he saying that marriage is honorable among all people? That's what it's hard to believe you have an argument over that, but that's what the scholars debate over, stuff like that. It's my opinion that what the author is saying is that marriage is honorable among all people. Okay, all people have a right to be married if that's what they choose to do. It's not mandatory, but if that's what they want to do, that's what they can do. It's an honorable institution, and the bed is undefiled. That's between the husband and wife. I've counseled a lot of folks through the years, and sometimes they come back and they're having a little bit of a problem in their new marriage. And one of the problems I've ran into, I'm not going to tell you about right now, so we'll just stop right here and take up next week.